off this segment of State of Play. Let's introduce Stephanie Hansen of the law firm of Young, Conaway, Stargett and Taylor. And we also have attorney Michael Stafford, who's also a columnist and MSNBC contributor. Let's talk about that year after year tradition in Dover. What do you guys think? Is that productive governing?
No. I think it's a great dog and pony show, and as much as some of the legislators complain about it, I think there's a lot of people down there who get a big thrill out of the last minute wheeling and dealing up until the wee hours of the morning. But I mean, really productive governance would be reaching some of these compromises in a more sort of measured and staggered fashion, and precluding these last minute, brouhahas that take us into, past midnight.
Curious, who do you think look forward to that year?
80% of them.
80%.
It's like the Super Bowl.
Okay.
It's like the Super Bowl. They look forward to it all, well, some look forward to it all session. You can go down there. I've been there at some, at various times in the past, and you can go down into the basement and you see the cafeteria is full. They camp out. They bring the bag lunches and books and everything that they need, pillows sometimes, to camp out. It's the Super Bowl of the Delaware General Assembly.
But to go back to your question about productive governance, Colin Benini's been preaching about we're falling off a fiscal cliff for as long, I think, most of my adult life, and maybe we've reached the point where he's actually right about that.
He's speaking it into existence. He's
speaking it into existence. If you keep saying something long enough, maybe it actually becomes true. When we talk about productive governance, the kind of structural, systemic issues we have, both with spending and revenue, are not the kind of problems you're going to be addressing at 1:30 in the morning next year when we're doing the bond bill. We need leadership with real vision. We need those hard discussions to happen, and it's not something that's going to get done at midnight right before they pass the bill. We're looking at, in some ways, dipping into the settlement funds.
Yeah.
Maybe a good analogy is a family raiding their retirement account to cover daily living expenses or cost of living expenses for a month or two. It buys you some time, but if you don't address revenue or spending, you're still going to go bankrupt. And for us, Colin likes to frame, having given Colin his plug, Colin likes to frame it as a spending problem.
Yeah.
Spending problems are also revenue problems that could be recast in a different way. I think we as Delaware have to have a vision of what do we want from government? What kind of services do we want it to provide? What kinds of infrastructural projects do we want to fund? What do we want government to do? And then we need to fund it appropriately. So while it could be a spending problem, it could also be a revenue problem. And I would say that some of the wealthiest Delawareans probably don't contribute their full fair share.
Well, then you have this bizarre scene of people lobbying for a farm bill and union jobs through a bond bill. Is that a cool thing?
Well, that's because there is so much in the bond bill. It allows you to do the horse trading that many feel is necessary in order to get those things addressed. That's why that happens the way that it does.
Yeah, and it's productive. Look, they got what they wanted.
Yeah.
By and large, the farm funding in particular. So if a strategy works, people are going to follow it. And there needs to be, they were so up against time pressure, and there was so much dissent even coming into yesterday's session that deals had to be cut, and those are chips on the table that people were able to get in. So good for them.
Well, let me pick your brains about the Transportation Trust Fund. Supposedly the money will be used to fix roads, but is that the actual answer?
It averted a crisis this year by going in and raising the DMV fees. What they didn't do, which is what I think we'd been talking about for the last several months, is they didn't do the harder thing, which would be the gas tax. The gas tax would have provided, of course, kind of a larger and more steady income going into the future to address some of those issues. But they chose instead to up the fees, which, like I said, it averted the crisis for now, but it didn't solve the problem.
Right. The fundamental crisis is this. We either have to reduce spending or raise revenue, or more likely we have to do a combination of both. Nobody wants to pay more and nobody wants to get less. That's the gist of this. That's the fundamental issue. Those discussions, that's the can that's been kicked down the road one additional year. But time is out. Time's up. Next year is going to be a very difficult budget. And I would hope, again, that people in leadership, people who want to be in leadership, really articulate a vision of how we get to a more sustainable fiscal footing for the state.
Before we really get too deep into next session, the day actually started with Governor Markell signing 6 bills which are aimed at improving the lives of women and help them against domestic violence. What are your thoughts?
I think that was like the sleeper package. You know, we haven't talked. That really hasn't been on the radar. It's certainly a collection of bills that everyone could get behind, and they could get behind fairly easily, and they all came together at the right time. So I would think it was the sleeper package that came through. It was great.
Yeah, obviously it addresses a real need. But it also it's not surprising that it sailed through so easily. Who in the Senate or the House is going to be the person who says no, 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 I'm voting against the domestic violence bill? That person doesn't exist. So it's not surprising it passed through with the kind of support that it had.
Okay, well, let's talk about the 2016 session. What do you think will happen next year?
I'm going to be surprised.
Or what is it going to look like?
Well, they're going to be looking at, again, another big year to have to scramble to try to find revenue or cut, even more so than they did this year. And I'm going to be really surprised if the tougher, tax revenue types bills go any further than they did this year. It's going to be a tough year.
Revenue, spending, education. Those are the big 3, I think, next year. And while it's difficult to see the kind of, I don't think anybody's really articulated that vision I keep talking about of how we're going to solve these fiscal problems in a systemic way. I'm hopeful. Eventually, we're going to have to face the problem. We're either going to run out of money, or it's got to be addressed. I'm hopeful that some coalition will come together that's going to really take a look at both the revenue and the spending and put us on a more sustainable path.